different land, all of that. So there's some issues there. Why else might it be significant that they were leaving to go there? And why? She said they were leaving their land. And why does that matter? It matters a ton, but why? Because it was the promised land. It wasn't just any land. And so we said from the outset, the fact that they are leaving is we need to not gloss over that. We need to notice that this is a significant deal. The famine was that severe that they felt that was their best option. To leave not just everything they'd ever known, where I grew up, where my family is, where all our connections are. That's hard enough. We know that today. In our society, we're much more mobile. It's fairly common for people to move around for jobs, that kind of thing. In that society, that's not the issue. You don't leave. You don't go far from home. That's your base of operations. That's your safety network. That is your life. So beyond that, which would have been hard in and of itself, we said that the deeper, bigger issue, too, is they're not just anyone leaving any old place. They are Israelites, the people of God, leaving the promised land with all that matters. That's a core part of their identity and their relationship with the God of the universe. So they were in dire straits, as we say. They weren't leaving just kind of like, we'll see how it goes. They had no other options they saw. It was that severe for them to take that risk. And part of this, too, look again, which verse is it? Look at verse 1. There it is. So a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. So that tells us on the front end, what does it mean to be a sojourner? So you're looking for a place, but you're not planning on staying there forever. You're passing through. It's a short-term thing. They're hoping in their mind we're refugees with everything that goes into that, but we're hoping it's not going to last forever. We have no other options but this. This seems to be our best option. We're going to take this risk, but the hope is that it's going to work out so that we don't have to stay there. This is not a long-term solution for us, but then what happens? They stayed there. They got stuck, right? And why? Why did they end up getting stuck there? We don't know the exact details of it, but people start dying, right? And so we see, early on, we're just like 3 verses in, and a hard scene immediately gets harder. Elimelech dies. And we said this is problematic because he's the head of the family, head of the household, the patriarch, and all that means, but also a primary breadwinner, right? An earner to support and provide for his family in a land that's not there with connections they don't have. So that's scary enough. But Naomi's not completely out of luck because she has 2 adult, able-bodied sons. And so it says they get married while they're there to Orpah and Ruth, and we obviously know who Ruth is. And so that's common, and I can't remember who marries which one. I think it tells us later. We'll get to that in chapter 4. But they're there then for about 10 years, it says. So at the very least, their quick sojourn, which they thought would just help us for a little bit, has become, we're settled here. We're putting down roots whether we wanted to or not. We've been here 10 years. They've got wives now. But then what happens to them? They die. So we're left. I'll put the wives here. The men of the family have passed away, and Naomi is left with nothing. Look again at verse 5. Kathy, will you read verse 5 again out loud for us? So who are they talking about in verse 5? Anyway, we mentioned this last week. She doesn't even get a name here. They named her before. Part of it is like, you should understand context clues, who it is, but we think this is intentional in verse 5. This is telling us more than just the facts of the story, the deeper meaning of what's going on in the story. At this point, 5 verses into the story, Naomi has lost everything, including her name. She has now been stripped of her husband. She's been stripped, robbed, emptied of her sons. She had already been robbed and stripped of her homeland and her core identity and her family and her heritage and her history, all that. As far as she knows, she has nothing left. She doesn't even have a name here. Her name's going to come up again later if we have time tonight. So what we have here is this woman has lost everything. And if we're tracking through this like a story that it is, when we get to the end of verse 5, this is like a commercial break, a perfect transition point to leave us hanging well, what's going to happen to her? Because again, if we know the day and age, she's got nothing, and she has nothing to fall back on and nothing to reach out to. She does technically have two other people in her life, so she's not entirely alone, but in terms of survival, she's entirely alone because they have nothing. And she says, I don't even have a name. I've been robbed of everything. My existence is hanging on by a thread. And so we're left wondering at the end of verse 5, what's going to happen to her? Is she going to make it? If so, how? How is she? She has no prospects here. She's emptied of everything, and we're not sure at this point in the story that could ever possibly turn around. So let's read on and see how far we get. Someone else want to read for us verses 6 through 18? Go through verse 18. Okay, we can stop right there. So the scene shifts. We see the follow-up. Naomi, when we had last seen her in verse 5, has no good options. Verse 6, things change for her, and she gets word that things are better, but where? Back home. So not for her, not where she's at, not her prospects, but back where she had left, which she had already, again, it doesn't tell us this directly, but we're humans. We understand that we carry things like this. This compounds her grief and her sorrow and her homesickness, that she hears God has done a new work, a good work for his people in his land that she had left. So she said, I've got nothing else. Maybe I can go back. And so notice in verse 13 the disconnect that she feels from God and her people. God has not told her to go back. God has done nothing good in her life. Matter of fact, she's pointing to God, and this is going to come up even more, to the author of why her life is so miserable. She doesn't have reasons for it. She just says, God has done this. God has emptied me. God has taken, verse 13, the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. She's telling Ruth and Orpah, don't stick with me, because my God seems to be against me. I'm going to go back home and just see what I can do here. And there's some really good things that come up out of this. The two daughter-in-laws follow her, stick with her, which speaks to their character, but also probably the relationship, the connection that they had with their mother-in-law. Some of it might be just a surface-level sense of duty, but beyond that, they're now willing, reversal of things, to leave their land and all they've ever known and their customs and their family and their connections to go with their mother-in-law as broken as she is and as they are, to move forward. But she releases them of any obligation. They're weeping together, they're crying, and she says, I appreciate it, you don't have to come with me. And then what reasons does she give them? She said, our options are not good. Actually, they're worse than not good. They're impossible. Even if somehow tonight I were to find a husband and we would get married and I would conceive, and all this is just hyperbole ridiculous. At her age, she's beyond all that. She knows that. They know that. But somehow, miraculously, I find a husband, we get married, and I conceive tonight. Are you going to wait for this, hoping it's a boy, hoping he grows up? But it's just one of them. And so she's saying, your options, if you stick with me, are going to get worse because there's nothing for you. There's nothing for me, and I'm just going back and hoping it might work out. There's no reason that you need to be miserable too. It's breaking my heart thinking about breaking your heart. God is upset with me for some reason. I'm going to go deal with it. You're free. You're released. Go back home to your people, to your land, to your gods. You'll have better luck there. So we see some of it of her and her grief and her heartbreak and her, sorrow, trying to release them from further sorrow, that she sees ahead for herself. But there's something else here. She, at this stage, has no expectations of things getting better. None. So she's trying to cut them free so she doesn't drag them down with her. But for herself, looking forward, there's no hope. There's nothing uplifting. She knows God is real. She knows He's in charge. But all she sees and knows from Him right now is nothing good. So she doesn't want to tie them up with that too. This speaks to her state of mind and her state of heart and her faith. She's beyond struggling. She's empty. She's broken. She has nothing else to do but try to go back home. And so how did the daughters-in-law respond? Orpah does what? She kisses her. She weeps with her. This is, again, a sign that speaks good towards Orpah and the connection she has with Naomi. She loves her. She weeps, and then she releases her. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's exactly what Naomi had asked her to do. It's what Orpah should have done. And she does do, but Ruth is different. And so already we see within the story, Ruth stands out, and she refuses to let her mother-in-law go. Like literally, she's clinging to her. And Naomi says, be like your sister-in-law. Go back to your family. Go back to your gods. You might have a life if you stay where you're from. If you come with me, there's nothing for you. But what does Ruth say? And what stands out to you about her response? Don't make me leave? You can't make me leave. I'm not going to. But so your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Whew. And I got 2 minutes before I'm supposed to stop. And so we're going to spend the 2 minutes talking about Ruth. So this is fascinating because up until this point, Ruth surely has heard of this Yahweh. I mean, her in-laws, her husband, they were Jewish, they were Israelites, that was their God. Were hoping, even though they left the promised land, that they didn't leave their faith and their heritage entirely, but they carried some of it with them. And here, in Naomi's brokenness, and as she's just calling out, I hope good things for you, but they're not going to be with me. She's mentioning the Lord's name as she's trying to send them out. I hope God blesses you, my God. But then she has no positive prospects lined up. But here, Ruth, who has no relationship with the one true God, it is not her God, the God of her people. She has no background or history other than maybe word of mouth. She says, he'll be mine. So she's already displaying a faith and a faithfulness, not just to Naomi, which is rare and noticeable and beautiful and like noteworthy, but also the seeds of what we're going to see develop a faith in God. I don't have any details. I don't know any of these things, but if this is where you're going, this is where I'm going. And if this is who your God is, then I'm gonna trust Him, and I'm gonna believe Him too. So we see her already lifting up Naomi. And in one sense, just the comfort of in the moment when you're grieving, knowing that you're not grieving alone, that you have someone who gets it and who sees and who cares and is just there with you. Can't solve it, can't fix it, but is with you in the moment. That's uplifting, or at least stabilizing for Naomi. So there's that level. But the deeper level, Ruth's faith in Naomi's God is turning Naomi's attention more towards this God. Do we see that? It's just seed form here, right? But we're going to see that get further developed. So we see Ruth being faithful and loyal, which is a major theme of ours and stands in contrast to what we've seen all the chapters before in Judges. And then she seems to have more faith in the Lord, whom she does not even know yet, than Naomi does. And then verse 18, and we'll stop here. Naomi doesn't even have the energy to fight anymore. She says, okay, come on, we can go. And so scene 2 ends with just elements, just seed form, just teasers of things changing. We don't know if anything good is actually coming, but we see in the midst of a really broken, hopeless situation where Naomi is going back home, just a broken, empty woman, we see Ruth stand out and be a stabilizing and a positive figure, which then makes us interested to seeing how this might develop moving forward.